We are Group 2 for the EPF3107 Microbiology and Safe Food Processing. The case study for our group is the pomegranate gummy candy.
I'll start by giving an introduction to our company. Our company is Sweet Glacier Sdn Bhd. It was established in year 2000. It is a sugar confectionery manufacturer and distributor for domestic and export markets based in Desa Serdang. Our products are halal certified by JAKIM, ISO 22000, Haccp, GMP, and MUSTI. Our company mission is aimed in helping people to create important moments in their lives. And our vision is becoming a prominent international brand associated with high-quality candy products.
Now I will continue with the Haccp scope. The Haccp plan of Sweet Glacier Company obey the 7 principles of Haccp to ensure the safety of pomegranate gummy candy produced. The Haccp plan audit every stage in the production of pomegranate gummy candy. The Haccp plans also include every potential biological, physical, and chemical hazards that might be happen in the production. The Sweet Glacier Company select the food contact materials, polypropylene, as the packaging materials of the pomegranate gummy candy. The target consumers of Sweet Glacier Company is all ages except for 3 years old and below in the local market. Now we will continue with the Haccp team and profile for our groups. We have 1 team leader and 4 Haccp members. So, FATIHAH, the Haccp consultant, is the Haccp team leader. YONG, the quality assurance manager. Me, Guishishan, the production manager. QURRATU, AINAH, human resource in charge. NAZIATUL, AZZUA, plant manager. 4 of us are the Haccp team member. All of us have the qualification and food working experience. We also train in the food hygiene and safety, and we accomplish our own responsibility to reduce the food hazard in the food industry.
So in this part, I will be explaining you guys and also showing you guys our company's food safety objectives, because each company must have food safety objectives according to the Haccp standard. So for our company, we have a few objectives, which are training, swab tests, product testing, evaluation, and customer complaint. So this is our table for food safety objectives, which consists of objectives that I've mentioned earlier. First one is training, swab test. Next is product testing, and in next slide, we have evaluation and also customer complaint. And next, this table also consists of target based on the objectives, time frame, and also responsibilities of the Haccp team.
Seven is product description and intended use. So permanent gummy candies are a broad category of gelatin-based chewable sweet. These gummy candies are in stock in a wide variety of shapes, sizes, and flavors. There are many varieties of jelly candy such as gummy bear, fruit jelly, and jelly bean. Our gummy candy is described as a delightful and soft texture. Jelly candy has a delicious flavor which is springy and stretchy that gives a great texture. It's a delicious and nutritious post-workout snack. Our gummy candies are colored with real fruit and vegetable juices. They are naturally flavored as they are made out of a real fruit juice only. So they are certified by USDA, organic, and also gluten-free, vegan, and non-GMO, tree nuts and peanuts free, and contain no egg or fresh or fish, no concentrated white sugar, no artificial coloring, no preservative, and no pork gelatin.
So in process description and technology, we have 7 steps, where the first step is the raw materials, receiving the raw materials. So the raw materials, which are pomegranate fruit, sugar, gelatin, and food additives, firstly received by the supplier. The supplier will be evaluated by questionnaire, and the supplier needs to provide a certificate that raw materials are free from physical hazard. And the raw material will be taken to X-ray detection to check if it is free from physical hazard before sending it to the dry storage and frozen storage. Next, the fruits will be taken to the primary processing area. So in this area, the pomegranate fruit will undergo washing, peeling, and deseeding. And lastly, the steaming process. So every worker will need to wash and sanitize hands wearing proper attire before entering the primary processing area. So in second step, ingredients weighing. When the pomegranate fruits have undergone the first process in the primary processing area, the fruit will be weighed. Dry materials such as sugar, gelatin, and food additives were taken to the primary area to be weighed. In this process, the supervisor will verify that there is no remaining cleaning chemical on the surface, which is on the weighing area. And the equipment to weigh the materials should be cleaned and rinsed first before weighing the materials. During weighing, the temperature of the weighing area should be maintained at -420 Celsius to prevent microbes from growing. The weighted raw materials will go through an X-ray detector to detect any physical hazards before sending it to the secondary process area. So in step 3, which is the cooking and mixing. So next, the weighted materials will be taken to the cooking area. In this area, all workers should be wearing closed attire with hand gloves and head cover to prevent hair and miscellaneous get into production. The materials will undergo a mass cooking and mixing process in this cooking area. The equipment that will be used or technology during this process is the multi-cooker machine. So the materials will be put into this machine. And during this process, the machine will take over the worker's duty by mixing it. The technology of the machine will be programmed to have a specific heat around 47 degrees Celsius to 67 degrees Celsius to caramelize the sugar and simmer the pomegranate fruit to a thicker juice. So the machine had a mixer ladle to mix the materials instead of traditionally mixing it by hand. And when the fruit and the sugar are caramelized, gelatin and food additives are added into the machine by following the food standards. Once the ingredients are mixed, the resulting liquid is cooked until it is taken into a slurry. So during cooking, the materials and the cooking area are kept out of the temperature danger zone, so it is able to kill microbes. So the fourth step is forming and molding. So when the materials are cooked, the slurry is cooked. The slurry undergo the molding process. The molds for gummy candies are lined with cornstarch, which prevents the gummy candies from sticking to the molds. The workers must always practice hygiene before entering this process. The slurry will be visually checked and go through an X-ray detector to prevent any physical hazard. So a supervisor will verify that there is no remaining cleaning chemical on the surface before the cooked material is placed on the molding area. And the cooked materials will be molded with the molding machine, which is the slurry. So the slurry will be placed into a molding machine, then the machine will form the cooked materials into a gummy candy, and the candy will be inspected whether it is on the highest quality and to check if it is broken or not achieve the quality standard. So in step 5, where it is cooling and drying. So once the gummy candy is produced, the candy will be sent to the secondary process area. So in this area, the candy will be in the cooling process. So during this process, the cooling area should be monitored as the time and the temperature must be controlled to avoid temperature danger zones. And the workers that monitor the cooling and drying room must always practice good hygiene to prevent cross-contamination to the candy production. So the gummy candies are cooled to 18.33 Celsius and allowed to sit for 24 to 36 hours to allow the slurry to cool and set. Once the candy has achieved its cooling temperature, the gummy candy will be moved to the packaging and storing area. So next step is in the packaging and storing. So in the packaging area, the gummy candies are removed and placed in a large drum tumbler. The gummy candies are tumbled in a light food grade oil that absorbs any remaining cornstarch and keeps the gummy bear candies soft and fresh. Then the gummy candies will be packed by a candy wrapping machine. So the magnets are installed in the packing area to prevent metal particles. The wrapper it's free from chemical leach, and the proper wrappers use are safe and follow food contact material FCMs. Once the gummy candy is packed, the gummy candy will be stored under room temperature to inhibit leaching and keep away from direct sunlight. Lastly, the candy will be sorted according to orders before the distribution process. And the last step is distributing process. The gummy candy is sorted according to orders and finally distributed to local shops and markets. And the container that will send the packed candy must be clean and dry, and the temperature of the container must be cool. If the temperature during delivery rises too high, which is warm, microbes will grow. Hence, the delivery must be extended to the next date or time. So, as you can see, this is the technology that is used to process the gummy candies. So, A is the cooking unit, where it is a multi-cooker, and then B is the depositor, and then C is the cooling tunnel. So, the next picture is the molding. So, you can see it is in a gummy size. So the slurry will be put into these gummy molds and before it is put, we put on the cornstarch so that the gummy, when it is cooked, it won't stick to the mold.
So as you can see, this is our summary for process flow. So first we will receive the raw fruits, and then we weigh the ingredient, and we mix all the ingredients and we cook it until it melts. Then we form and molding. Next, we will dry and cool it. Next is package and storage. And lastly, we will just distribute our product.
First principle in hazard plan is the hazard analysis. So first, we'll analyze the category of potential hazard in every process step. Second, we evaluate whether the potential hazard could happen in premise or could not happen. Third, we evaluate whether the potential hazard is a significant hazard by referring to the food safety matrix. And lastly, we determine the measures that can be taken to control the hazard. So the table at the left is the food safety matrix that we will be applied to conduct the hazard analysis. We will determine the severity and the likelihood of the hazard. So the first step of the hazard analysis is to determine the potential hazard that happen in every process step. So in the first step of receiving raw materials, we determine that the potential physical hazard that might be happen are dust, sand, wood, and metal pieces. So now we have to justify whether this hazard is an inclusion or an exclusion hazard. As we know that the supplier have the X-ray detection system and they provide certification that this raw material is free from the physical hazard. We justify that this physical hazard as an exclusion. So the second step, we have to evaluate whether this hazard is a significant hazard or not. By referring to the food safety matrix, we justify that this physical hazard can cause serious illness, and the likelihood of this hazard is not expected to occur. Therefore, this hazard is not a significant hazard. And now, we have to determine the measures that can be applied to control this hazard. We will carry out the examination of supplier certificate upon receiving, and the supplier audit and visual check also are the measures that apply to control this hazard. Therefore, by following these 4 steps, we are able to construct a table of potential hazard that might happen in every process step. We determine and analyze the potential hazards for every process step in the production of pomegranate gummy candy.
So after determining the hazard analysis of each process, we need to establish the critical control points, which is CCP. There are 3 steps in determining CCP. Step 1, determine critical limits for each CCP. Step 2, obtain evidence that shows each critical limit is effective in controlling the hazard. Step 3, implement and monitor the validated critical limits at the CCP to ensure that the food safety hazard is controlled. As you can see in the first process, which is receiving raw materials, pomegranate fruits, the physical hazard is dust, sand, wood, and metal pieces. So the next step is to know whether the control measure for this hazards control at this process step is necessary for product safety. The answer is yes. So the measure taken is to ensure workers implement good manufacturing practice GMP. However, this process step couldn't reduce the likely occurrence of this hazard to an acceptable level. At the same time, there is no contamination occurring at an acceptable level. Therefore, it is not a CCP. Let's see another example. In the same process, the biological hazard occur is E. coli, Salmonella, monocytogenes, and norovirus. The next step is also as the same as the one mentioned before. The answer is also yes. So the temperature needs to be maintained at -4 to 0 degrees Celsius during transportation. While this process step could reduce the likely occurrence of this hazard to an acceptance level, hence it is a CCP. The rest of the CCP is also determined using this method. So here's the table of CCP which we have determined.
After the determination of critical control point, we have to determine the critical limit. What is critical limit? Critical limit is the maximum or minimum value to which a biological, chemical, or physical parameters that must be controlled at a critical control point to prevent eliminate or reduce to an acceptable level for the occurrence of a food safety hazard. Critical limits can be easily measured and does not involve a lot of analysis or testing on the products. Examples of critical limits are temperature, pH, moisture level, water activity, and time. The critical limits for the first CCP is maintain the temperature of pomegranate fruits at -4 to 0 degrees Celsius during the transportation to prevent the growth of microbes such as E. coli, Salmonella, monocytogenes, and norovirus. The critical limits for the second CCP is cooking at 47 to 67 degrees Celsius. This can help to eliminate the growth of microbes. The third CCP is forming and molding. The critical limit is maintain the temperature of -4 to 0 degrees Celsius to prevent the growth of microbes. The fourth CCP is cooling and drying. The critical limits for this CCP are practice of effective cleaning and sanitizing procedures, cooling time for 30 minutes, and cooling temperature at -4 to 0 degrees Celsius to prevent the growth of microbes. The last CCP is the packaging and storing. The critical limits are acidic conditions, metal detector calibrate with 1.0 mm ferrous and 1.5 mm non-ferrous, and the stainless steel test sphere. And lastly, the use of food contact materials, which is the polypropylene plastic.
As you can see right here, we have monitoring table according to the critical limits, which include the procedure, frequency, and who is in charge of the monitoring procedure, also a material receiving log. So in next slides, we have the same monitoring table and log for each critical control point, which is cooking and mixing, forming and molding, cooling and drying, and lastly, packaging and storing.
So for principle 5, which is determination of corrective action for each CCP. First CCP is receiving raw materials. So we have to reject any doubtful ingredients. First, we have to monitor on imports and export of the ingredients such as the temperature and hygiene. We have to hold for further evaluation by raw material QC and the record in material receiving log sheet. Next is cooking and mixing. So we have to cook the ingredient at temperature of 47 until 67. We have to adjust the temperature and time by setting the equipment well. We have to discard the spoilage and rework with the fresh material. And the person in charge is process QC and production QC. And the record will be cooking log sheet. So that is forming and molding. So we have to ensure the temperature of the materials about -4 until 0 Celsius. So we have to adjust the temperature and time by setting the equipment well. So the product will be held to check the condition of a material. So the person in charge will be process QC and production QC. And the record is molding log sheet. So next is cooling and drying. So we have to re-dry or sorting out which damaged or spoilage material. So we have to strictly observe the material or the room to reduce the moisture. So we have to discard if there are any spoilage. So the person in charge will be lab supervisor and production QC and record in cooling and drying log sheet. For last CCP is packaging and storing. Rejection should be in this procedure and the instruction to the assigned person. So we have to do some inspection on plastic sticker that used for labeling and the expired date. So discard if there are any physical hazard in this product. So the person in charge, such as logistics supervisor, transport supervisor, and sorting packaging supervisor, and will be recorded in packaging log sheet.
So principle 6, determination of verification process. So validation is making sure that something is true, plan for food safety plan to succeed and looking into the future. And verification is an action that establishes the truth of something, check that food safety plan has worked, and looking at the past. So verification is the principle which confirms that the hazard plan, if followed, will produce safe food for the final consumer. So in the verification process, the process has 3 key components, which is first is the validation. So for example, will the hazard plan ensure that safe food will be produced? Verification, is the hazard plan working? is it producing safe food, and the review is the HACCP plan up to date. So in this, I will show you the table for the determination of verification process. In this principle 6, we have 5 columns. So in the first column is the verification activity, and the second column is justification. The third one is the frequency, and the fourth one is the person responsible, and the fifth one is the reviewer. So in this verification process, it is starting from the first until the end. For example, we see from the first one, verification activities scheduling. So we have to justify if any deviations from the CCP will be recorded and follow up during reviews, and the frequency is yearly or upon HACCP system change, and the person responsible is the HACCP coordinator. And the one to review this activity is the plan manager. Second is the initial validation of HACCP plan, and the justification is any deviations from CCP will be recorded and followed up during reviews. Prior to and during the initial implementation plan, and the person responsible is HACCP leader, and reviewer is the HACCP team. So the list does go on for the subsequent validation of HACCP plan, verification of CCP, monitoring as described in the plan. For example, we can see in the next slide. So we put in our CCP. The first one is the receiving raw materials. Second one is cooking, mixing. Third one is the forming. The fourth one is cooling and drying. And the fifth one is packaging, storing. So the last two is the review of monitoring correction action records to show the compliance with the plan. So review of monitoring is based on principle 5. And the comprehensive HACCP system verification. So this one we can see it on yearly, and person in charge is the HACCP team, and the review is the plan manager.
10.7, Principle 7 is documentation and report. So firstly, for the documentation, it is for references purpose, and records is records for a day-to-day basis on each critical control point. For the documentation, firstly, we have summary of prerequisite program. So prerequisite programs includes facilities, supply control, cleaning and sanitation, personal hygiene, training, chemical control, receiving, storage, and shipping, and lastly, pest control. So for each prerequisite program have its own control measure. For example, for facilities, the control measure is cleanliness. And for pest control, the control measure is crawling and flying insects and includes also rodents. For the documentation, we have supportive documents to HACCP manual. So inside the supportive documents, we have sensitive material. So for our company, our sensitive material is pomegranate fruits. To determine the sensitive material, we will be using sensitive material decision tool, which I've shown here, according it's question 1, question 2, and question 3. So we will be following the path according to our answer until we find the final answer to determine the sensitive material. So next we have critical control decision tools. According to the hazard, we will be following the chart until we can determine whether it is a CCP or not. If it's not a CCP, we will be modify the step process or product, and we will be repeating the flow until we will find the final answer.
Next one is the training policy and plan. As you can see, the first one is to assemble the HACCP team. Second, describe the product and intended use. The third one is procedures and flow diagram. The fourth one is identify the hazards and control measurements. And the fifth one is determine the critical control points, CCP, and establish each. And the sixth one is to establish monitoring system for each CCP. The seventh one is establish corrective action and verification procedures for each CCP. And lastly is the HACCP plan verification and internal audit. Customer complaint procedure. So in this procedure, firstly, we have to review and compare your customer complaints in the past and with the present. Second one is categorize the customer complaint into different categories such as microbiological, chemical, physical, quality, allergens, and regulatory. And the third one is to investigate if the individual hazards have been assessed as part of your HACCP plan based on your hazard analysis. And the fourth one is to document any hazard that has not been identified and complete the risk assessment. And lastly is the cross-reference and document any customer complaint within your hazard analysis. Drug recall and procedure. So firstly, we have to decide whether the food needs to be recalled. And second, establish a food recall team. The third one is information on the food safety incident is gathered, such as production and sales record, employees, suppliers, complaints, audit, and sample analysis. The fourth one is to notify the relevant authorities. The fifth one is isolate the affected products in your control. Number 6 is to notify the consumers. 7 is to monitor the progress. And 8 is control the products that is recalled. Number 9 is disposing the recalled products. And lastly is to investigate and fix the cause of the recall.
So record in HACCP, which is we have to record the CCP itself, the verification activity, frequency, person responsible record, and lastly is corrective action. So in this product, we have 5 CCP. For the first one is receiving raw material, and we have to monitor on import and export of ingredient. So we do it weekly, but for once per shift. And the person in charge is raw material QC, and we record it in material receiving log sheet. So he will or she will reject any doubtful ingredient. So next is cooking and mixing. So the person in charge will be process QC and production QC. They will monitor on the multiple cooker machine for any damage. And once per shift, according to our HACCP plan, we record in cooking log sheet. And they should ensure the cooking at a temperature of 47 until 67. So next is forming and molding. The person in charge will be process QC and production QC. So they have to monitor on the molding machine for any damage and inspect the facility operation. So according to the HACCP plan, they will inspect the machine once per shift and will record it in molding log sheet. And they should ensure the temperature is -4 until 0 for the CCP part, cooling and drying. So the person in charge will be lab supervisor and production QC. They have to check on sample of production weekly, once per shift, and will be recorded in cooling and drying log sheet. And they have to redry or sorting out any damaged product. So lastly is packaging and storing. Monitor on packaging machine for damage, and the person in charge will be logistic supervisor, transport supervisor, and sorting packaging supervisor, and will be recorded in packaging log sheet. They will do the rejection and discard any damaged product.
In summary, there are 5 CCP in this HACCP plan. These CCP are to prevent the food safety hazard and to make sure the best food quality.
In conclusion, this HACCP plan can prevent the food safety issue from arising in the product pomegranate gummy candy and ensure a desired food safety level to achieve the basic and legal requirements on food safety. These HACCP plans also enhance the confidence of customers on the quality of pomegranate gummy candy and achieve the vision of Sweet Glacier Company to become a prominent international brand associated with high-quality candy products.